On today's Factions Compared episode, we examine the superweapons of the Star Wars universe. Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another episode of Star Wars Factions Compared. Today we're talking about superweapons, examining the Galaxy Gun, the Starforge, Centerpoint Station, and the Death Star. As always, we'll look at these weapons and the factions that controlled them in some depth, and then at the end we'll rank them from best to worst. Before I begin, however, I'd like to ask you guys for one quick favor. Please, if you have the time, check out and subscribe to Wayward Jedi. He is one of my favorite Star Wars YouTubers and makes some of the best content on the site. His editing is unmatched, and his focus on the storytelling and themes of the saga is unique among Star Wars YouTubers. Before The Last Jedi, he made an enlightening video on the Rey and Kylo relationship, which really predicted a lot of things that would come about in the new movie, and personally moved me over to the Reylo camp. He also put together a really interesting hour-long podcast-style review of The Last Jedi, and to be honest, it completely changed how I saw the movie. I went from not liking it to now liking it quite a bit. So I'll put a link down in the description, also up in the top right corner. Make sure to check him out. First, we have perhaps the oldest superweapon in the Star Wars galaxy, Centerpoint Station. Centerpoint Station was created by the Celestials hundreds of thousands of years before the modern Star Wars era. It's believed to be one of a number of devices, including sinkhole stations, which the Celestials used to alter the position of planets and systems within the galaxy. It was capable of grabbing an object as large as a star or as massive as even a black hole and moving it across galactic space. Notably, one of the original uses of the Centerpoint Station was to form the Corellian system. The superweapon's power is undeniable. It can either move planets around or just destroy them with sheer gravitonic power. You can also get creative with how you use the station. During the Yuuzhan Vong War, Centerpoint Station was used to take down half of a Yuuzhan Vong fleet which was attacking Fondor. The station is also quite large, and there is interior space which could be used to house troops or whatever else. Centerpoint Station, however, is not without weaknesses. The first is that it seems to be completely immobile. We don't see it leave the Corellian system. It also has a limited range. The farthest we've seen it attack is Fondor, which, on a galactic scale, is pretty close by to Corellia. Furthermore, the station isn't fully understood, and a firing of the weapon requires a great amount of foresight and the use of highly skilled technicians and engineers. Finally, Centerpoint Station does not have traditional weapon defenses. It doesn't have laser cannons or turbo lasers. It relies solely on its gravity generators to do damage. Given that the station is always in the same place and everyone knows where it is, it doesn't have traditional defenses, and the weapon is difficult to understand, it would certainly be a target for surprise attacks. Now, this can be mitigated against by protecting it with a fleet, but we've also seen people attack Centerpoint Station from the inside, given that the ship is so large and there appears to be so many entry points. So this vulnerability and the fact that the station is immobile with a limited range need to be considered. Moving on from the Celestials and Centerpoint Station, we have another very old superweapon, the Rakata Starforge. Rather than being a purely offensive tool like the other weapons on this list, the Starforge is something completely different. It's basically a super efficient factory. Through only the power of the dark side along with the energy of a nearby star, the Starforge was capable of outputting an endless supply of ships. What's more, it appears that you can actually input your own designs into the Starforge and have it make those, so you have the ability to create an almost endlessly large army of any composition you choose. The Starforge is thus best used for a surprise attack on the galaxy, not unlike what the First Order does in the sequel trilogy, or more directly and relevantly, how Revan and Malak do back in the times of the Old Republic. Like with every superweapon, the Starforge, however, is not without weaknesses. The first and the main one is that it was powered by the dark side. People weren't aware of this, and being too close to the Starforge, especially if you weren't familiar with the dark side of the Force, could result in the complete corruption of your personality. Thus, after a time, the Starforge, and more directly the dark side of the Force, ends up controlling you, rather than the other way around. This does somewhat limit the practicality of the Starforge because you're limited in the amount of time you can spend at the space station. I also do think, realistically, production capabilities on the Starforge would have an upper limit. The interdictor cruisers that we see Revan use are much smaller than later Star Destroyers, for instance. They're certainly much smaller than, say, a Dreadnought, so I would imagine there is some upper limit to what the Starforge can produce. Like Centerpoint Station, the Starforge also only has a limited amount of external defenses. It has turbo lasers near the hangar entries, but besides for that, relies on the ships that it creates to protect the station. That being said, the defenses are supplemented by a form of pulse generator, which seems to disable ships on the nearby planet of Rakata Prime. Honestly, I think much of the Starforge's effectiveness depends on whether the other factions know of its location. If they do, I think mounting an attack against the Starforge would be fairly easy. You either disable on the ground the Rakatan tech or destroy it with an orbital bombardment. You then can just assault the Starforge itself in a traditional manner. Still, if you own the station, you can protect this by, say, making one of every 2 ships produced stay in a fleet around the superweapon. Still, there's no real way you could protect against something like Centerpoint Station or one of the other superweapons on this list. Incredible production feats can also be accomplished without the use of the superweapon, just through sheer industrial capability. Next, we have one of the many superweapons of the post-Endor Galactic Empire. Specifically, we're looking at the Galaxy Gun of the Reborn Empire. The Galaxy Gun was an incredible weapon, capable of destroying planets from across the galaxy. Basically, you'd pick a target, aim the Galaxy Gun at it, and a hyperspace missile would be sent through space, destroying the target nearly without fail. Even ion cannons or the concentrated firepower of capital ships wouldn't destroy the missile. The missiles themselves had a variable yield. They could be used to destroy something as small as cities, or to take out an entire dreadnought or planet. The Galaxy Gun itself is also mobile. While protecting it properly with the fleet, the Reborn Empire was able to quickly strike at the New Republic, taking down dozens of planets and other installations without any sort of real response. With a Galaxy Gun, you can take down an enemy's homeworld, or their prime production facility, or their newest dreadnought, and there's really nothing they can do to stop you other than destroying the gun itself. You can try to prevent that by jumping the gun around the galaxy, keeping it in hyperspace when it's not in use, or by putting a fleet around it. Now, there are some weaknesses with the super weapon. The first is the gun itself is relatively slow and immobile, and it doesn't seem to be particularly well armored or armed, so it's a pretty big target. On one occasion, the projectile of the weapon also didn't explode. However, this seems to be more related to quality of production issues rather than the weapon itself. Finally, we have the most famous super weapon in Star Wars, the Galactic Empire's Death Star 1. Since I'm sure most of you guys are very familiar with the Death Star, I'll just hit some of the quick advantages and disadvantages. The station is incredibly powerful and, without its weakness, nearly impossible to destroy. It has protection against capital ships in the form of innumerable turbo laser emplacements and thousands of starfighters, which can also provide defense. The main weapon can be used against planets, capital ships, moons, space stations, and the yield can be varied. It is, however, a fairly blunt weapon in many ways. It takes a while to aim it, it doesn't move very fast through hyperspace, and of course there is the weakness with the exhaust port, although it is very difficult to exploit this weakness without awareness of it. Generally, the Death Star is extraordinarily powerful, almost impossible to destroy without the use of another super weapon, and also capable of hitting targets across the galaxy due to the presence of an actual hyperdrive. With that being said, let's take a second now to rank the super weapons from best to worst. Coming in at number 1, in my opinion, is the Galaxy Gun of the Reborn Empire. Being able to hit targets across the galaxy and having really no response to this is probably the best you can hope for as a faction with a super weapon. The Galaxy Gun was incredibly disruptive, and although the station itself was relatively slow and immobile, its projectiles were nearly impossible to stop, moved through hyperspace very quickly, and could inflict a devastating amount of damage on any type of target. Yes, it can be beaten, and we saw that the New Republic was able to destroy not only the Galaxy Gun, but the Eclipse II Super Star Destroyer in a single battle, but all weapons have their associated weaknesses. The destructive capability and the uniqueness of this super weapon, I think, really can't be ignored. After the Galaxy Gun, I've had a really tough time trying to decide which super weapon should be next. The Death Star is extremely powerful and difficult to destroy, but it doesn't match the power of Centerpoint Station. Centerpoint Station, however, seems to be immobile with a limited range. The Starforge gives the user the power to take over the entire galaxy and amass a fleet without having to otherwise dedicate a vast amount of resources to shipbuilding. However, should an enemy discover the location of the base, I think that it's only a matter of time before it's destroyed, and that, coupled with the dark side influence associated with the Starforge, gives it some weaknesses as well. However, all in all, even with its weaknesses, the vast power of Centerpoint Station puts it at number 2 on this list. Centerpoint Station can be used to destroy entire star systems from afar, along with things like enemy fleets, installations, and basically anything else within its radius. The fact that it's the creation of an ancient, incredibly powerful race comes with benefits and drawbacks. For one, the station is relatively hard to actually use, and it takes a good amount of scientific knowledge to actually fire the weapon. However, it is incredibly large and presumably fairly durable. With full control and use of Centerpoint Station, you could likely dominate the interior core of the galaxy. Next we have the Death Star, and it's at number 3 because while it's not quite as powerful as the Galaxy Gun or a Centerpoint Station, in the amount of destruction it can cause at least, it would be incredibly difficult to destroy without knowledge of the weakness. Earlier this week I covered 5 ways that you could attempt to do so, but I still think that it would be a struggle. The Death Star is capable of destroying an entire planet, and unlike the other stations on this list, has incredibly powerful defenses. Without the flaw of the Death Star 1 or the hubris of Emperor Palpatine, who put the Death Star 2 in harm's way to try to destroy the Rebel Alliance, the Empire could have very easily ruled the entire galaxy, destroying any opposition. That leaves the Starforge as the worst superweapon on this list, and I know this one will be fairly controversial because I know you guys love the Old Republic, and I do too. But I do have questions about the production capabilities of the Starforge when facing modern factions, and I think that the dark side energies powering it are of great harm to the user. Still, it's an incredible weapon, as are all the super weapons on this list. And keep in mind, this has all just been my opinion. What do you think down in the comments? And am I right about the Starforge? Am I wrong? Which station is the best? Which is the worst? Let me know all of that, and also vote in the upper right hand corner. Anyway, as always guys, this has been EckhartsLadder. Thank you so much for watching, and hey, as always, may the Force be with you.